Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the year 1200 to experience what it was like to get sick and try to get better. Picture this. You wake up shivering beneath a thin, scratchable blanket, in a damp one-room cottage that smells faintly of onions, smoke, and a wet dog. Your throat feels like it's been lined with thorns. Your nose is running like the village stream, and someone's baby is crying to huts over. Welcome to medieval illness. Hope you weren't too attached to your ability to breathe clearly. You're sniffling, sweating, and trying to sit up when your mother notices you're looking a bit gray about the cheeks. You try to shrug it off, but sneezing 3 times in a row gets you noticed. In this world, there's no concept of viruses or bacteria, only the suspicion that maybe you've displeased God, or caught a bad wind, or worse, angered the local cunning woman. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far we're traveling each night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge outside, wrapped in your cloak, feet bare on the frosted dirt, hoping the chill might knock the sickness out of you. It doesn't. Instead, a small crowd begins to gather near the chapel. Someone's whispering about your complexion. It's hard to tell if they're concerned or just curious to see if you'll die in an interesting way. Your mother, always practical, rubs a cut onion across your feet and straps it there with linen. This is believed to draw out the bad air. You're too tired to argue, and honestly, your feet were cold anyway. Later, someone suggests garlic and ale. You drink it. Now, your breath smells like vengeance and yeast. By midday, a priest stops by to check in. He asks whether you've made any recent moral mistakes that might be responsible for your current state. You try to recall if stealing that extra egg from the communal hen counts, but your head is pounding too much to form a proper confession. Still, the priest nods solemnly and sprinkles a little holy water at you for good measure. Doesn't hurt, doesn't help. The thing about being sick in 1200 is that everybody has a theory. Some say it's the moon's fault, others believe you've got too much phlegm, and that's throwing off your entire personality. One man suggests burying a live toad in your garden. Another recommends warm cow dung placed on your chest. You politely pretend not to hear that last one. Historians still argue whether most villagers actually believed in these remedies, or if they just did something to feel a little less helpless. Either way, your family takes no chances. You're now resting on a straw mattress that pokes in all the wrong places, with an herbal compress on your forehead, and a half-melted wax figurine of Saint Sebastian on your chest. The symbolism is unclear, but everyone agrees it looks hopeful, even when you cough. People take notice. Loud coughing can mean it's just a chill. Or it can mean lock up the goats and pray. You overhear someone saying you should be bled soon just in case. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you've heard about the knives. You try not to look anxious, but it's hard when your cousin keeps miming a fountain from his wrist. As the day stretches on, your fever rises. You're sweating, but you're cold. You're hungry, but nothing tastes right. In a time with no thermometers, no chest x-rays, no Vicks vapor rub, you're at the mercy of what the body chooses to do. And right now, your body is doing interpretive dance in slow agony, the most accurate historical record of illness. Diaries that list things like, he was pale, and then he coughed, and then he lay down for 3 days, and then he died. Comforting stuff. Still, there's a weird kind of peace that settles as the candlelight flickers on the wall. You're surrounded by people who want you to survive, even if their methods include beetles and boiled nettles. Someone sings you a lullaby that sounds suspiciously like a funeral hymn, but you choose not to think too hard about that. Outside, the evening air grows heavy. You hear the crackle of wood as someone heats a broth thick with leeks and sorrow. Your nose is too stuffed to smell it, but you accept a spoonful out of politeness and the vague hope that it might bring you back to the living. The texture is mostly slime. The taste is herbal, but not in a fun way. By nightfall, the family is rotating shifts watching you breathe. This is less dramatic than it sounds. It mostly involves leaning nearby and occasionally poking you to see if you're still warm. You are for now. As you drift in and out of half sleep, you realize that the sickness has become a community project. Your aunt is making charms. Your neighbor brought over some dried rosemary for the air. A traveling peddler offered to exorcise your house for a single chicken. Your family declined, mostly because they liked that chicken. And somewhere, in the back of your aching mind, you understand, being sick in 1200 isn't a personal inconvenience. It's a local event, with everyone half terrified that you're about to become a cautionary tale. You wake the next morning feeling not better, Worse, if anything, the fever is still clinging to you like a wool tunic in summer, and your throat feels like you gargled ashes. That means it's time for the next stage of medieval healing. Diagnosis by humorous. Your village doesn't have a doctor in the modern sense. What it does have is a barber surgeon who also pulls teeth, trims beards, and occasionally delivers babies. Today, he's in diagnosis mode, which means he peers into your eyes, sniffs your breath, and announces gravely that your humors are out of balance. Specifically, too much phlegm, not enough color. You blink at him, unsure what that means for your future. In case you missed the lecture at medieval medical school, don't worry. So, did most people? Here's the quick version. The body is believed to contain for humor's blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Each one has a personality. Phlegm is sluggish and cold. Yellow bile is hot and aggressive. And so on. If you're sick, it means one humor is winning the popularity contest. And that's bad. So the solution, balance them. That might mean applying hot compresses, eating specific foods. Or if your barber surgeon is feeling bold, draining some blood. Lucky you. He decides to start with diet. He mutters something about cooling the heat and prescribes a broth made of lettuce, vinegar, and boiled barley. You choke down a spoonfuls and immediately regret it. The taste is like soggy sadness, but apparently it's good for your spleen, or maybe your soul, still sick, still shivering. You find yourself staring at a small metal bowl. It's for bloodletting. The barber surgeon carefully ties a linen strip around your upper arm, selects a blade that looks like it's been through several previous customers, and slices just a little. You feel the sting, then the warmth of blood trickling down. It's supposed to release the bad humors. You just feel faint and annoyed. To be fair, bloodletting wasn't entirely random. It followed a complex set of rules. What day of the week it was, your astrological sign, even the phase of the moon. Historians still argue whether this was medicine or performance art. Either way, the bowl is now half full, and the barber is nodding like this was a good idea. You try not to pass out. Next come the leeches. Not always used, but definitely trendy. You've heard tales of noblemen with entire jars of the things. The idea is that the leeches draw out impurities. In practice, it feels like having cold, wet raisins stuck to your skin. They wiggle. You shudder. Someone once believed leeches could cure anything from fever to bad dreams. One chronicler even claimed they helped with melancholy caused by reading too much. You briefly consider if that's your problem, but know your biggest issue is probably the leech on your ankle. After the bleeding, you're tucked into bed again and given a tisane of mint, wild thyme, and honey. This one's not bad. Sweet, warm, vaguely comforting. You sip slowly and try to pretend this means you're recovering. It doesn't. A neighbor stops by with a copy of Tacuinum Sanitatis, the medieval wellness manual of the day. She points to a woodcut that shows a man lounging under a tree with a sheep. Caption: best practice for recovery, gentle rest, sweet music, and warm breezes. You look around, there's no music. The breeze smells like cabbage and someone just spilled chamber pot water nearby. Close enough. Some family members suggest you wear red to encourage the blood to circulate. You comply, mostly because someone sewed you into the tunic while you were semi-conscious. Others are more practical. Your uncle brings a jar of goose fat and starts rubbing it on your chest. You smell like dinner now. And then there's the urine test. Yes, that's a thing. The barber asks for a sample, which you produce with all the dignity one can manage when being handed a ceramic pot. He holds it up to the light, swirls it gently, sniffs and declares to cloudy, liver imbalance. You blink. That was supposed to be medical science. In 1200, color and smell are diagnostic tools. If it's pale, you're cold. If it's dark, you're too hot. If it has bubbles, someone thinks your spirit is trying to escape. Historians still debate whether this urine-watching tradition helped in any way or just gave people something to do while waiting for the fever to break. By the third day, you're weak, sweaty, and convinced the bed is made of bricks, but you're still breathing, which in medieval terms is considered a win. Your mother says you're past the crisis. The barber isn't so sure. He's preparing a concoction of crushed oyster shells and rose water. You don't even ask what it's for. You overhear your cousin quietly asking if it's time to bring in the grave candles. You glare at her from under your sweat-drenched blanket. She offers you a fig. You accept the fig. The fig helps, spiritually, if not medically. That night, you dream of floating in a warm river of broth. You think someone is singing. You wake up with the taste of thyme on your tongue and a leech still stubbornly clinging to your calf. Sleep is erratic. Sometimes, you feel your body shaking, sometimes from chills, sometimes from the sheer absurdity of it all. You wonder if there's a version of this in the afterlife, and if so, whether they at least have fluffier pillows. But here's the thing, you're still fighting. Even with knives and vinegar and urine sniffing, some part of you keeps showing up, keeps coughing, keeps clinging to the hope that tomorrow the fever will break, and you'll go outside again. You'll breathe clean air, eat unboiled vegetables, and maybe even step barefoot on grass instead of muddy straw. It might take a few more days, or weeks, or, if you're unlucky, someone might commission a small carving of you to place near the family hearth because that's how you'll be remembered. But for now, your heart keeps beating, the stars outside keep shifting, and the leech finally falls off. By now, your fever has turned you into a part-time philosopher and full-time lump. You've been lying in bed so long that your body is convinced the straw mattress is your final form. But just as your senses begin to return, so do the healers, the other healers, the ones who don't carry knives or leeches, but roots, rosaries, and advice that sounds suspiciously like a curse. This is where the herbalist, midwives, and wise folk come in. Most towns had at least one. In your case, it's a woman named Alfreda, whose teeth are few but whose knowledge of wild plants could rival a modern pharmacy. She arrives with a woven basket and a serious expression. Time for natural remedies. You brace yourself. She brews a tea of yarrow, eyebright, and elderflower. For the heat in your head, she says. You sip obediently, despite it tasting like mossy socks. Then she places a warm compress of chamomile over your forehead. That actually feels nice. Until she casually mentions she once used the same mixture on a goat with the sniffles. You're not sure whether to be comforted or offended. One of her methods involves hanging dried mugwort above the doorway to drive away illness spirits. Another includes tying a bag of breadcrumbs, hedgehog spines, and what may or may not be a fingernail around your neck. Protection, she says. You don't argue. You've had worse things stuck to you this week. There's also a salve she rubs on your chest made of beeswax, goose grease, and powdered rose petals to soothe the lungs. It smells floral and faintly poultry. You're beginning to understand that soothing in the 1200s often involved smelling like a garden that had been attacked by farm animals. And then there are the charms. She whispers something in Latin or a version of Latin and lays her hands lightly on your chest. You half expect to feel heat, or maybe divine inspiration. Instead, your left eye twitches and you sneeze. Superstition isn't a bonus here, it's the foundation. People know illness is spiritual, or moral, or maybe caused by a demon who crawled in while you were sleeping. To modern ears, that sounds dramatic, but when you're delirious, sweating, and hallucinating St. Cuthbert in the rafters, you start to think, maybe the demon theory isn't so wild after all. Historians still argue whether medieval folk believed in magic as medicine, or simply as emotional scaffolding. But either way, charms were standard. Someone's cousin once got better right after sleeping with a consecrated chicken feather under their tongue. Coincidence? Unlikely. A local nun comes by with a vial of holy water and a splinter of wood she claims is from the true cross. She dips the wood in the water and traces a cross on your forehead. Then she hands you a tiny wax figure of Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of toothaches, and says it works for fevers too. If you believe hard enough, you hold the wax saint like a tiny, lumpy action figure and hope she knows what she's doing. At this point, your room is beginning to resemble a small shrine. There are herbs hanging from the rafters, scraps of linen soaked in onion juice, a string of garlic above your bed, and a toad someone buried under the threshold to confuse the fever. You're not sure how that works, but you respect the creativity. One of the stranger remedies involves roasted mouse paste. Yes, mouse. Alfreda mashes it up with sage and insists it's only for emergencies. You politely decline, using your sudden dry heaving as a reason. As evening falls, you notice a bowl of milk left near the hearth. It's not for you, it's to feed the household brownie, a sort of helpful spirit who may be persuaded to heal you in exchange for a snack. You briefly wonder if brownies accept tips. Despite all this, something about the atmosphere is comforting. Everyone is trying something. No one's giving up. Even if 60% of the solutions involve animal bits or whispered Latin, there's a rhythm to it, a strange dance of care and chaos. You hear the town bell toll once. That means curfew. That also means the priest has locked up the chapel and people are now praying from home. Some pray aloud. Others just light candles. Your neighbor chants an entire psalm while pacing with a thurible that smells like incense and desperation. At one point, a child peers in the window and asks if you're dead yet. You throw a shoe at him. He giggles and runs. You take this as a good sign. In the night, you dream of being carried by a giant made of honey and rosemary. In the dream, You're not sick. You're glowing, healthy, wrapped in linen like a saint in a stained glass window. Then the dream shifts, and you're being chased by a talking leech. Less nice. You wake in the dark. The compress has fallen off your head. The wax figure is somewhere under the bed. A breeze stirs the garlic braid above you. And for the first time in days, your chest feels a little lighter. You still hurt, but it's a different kind of hurt, more tired than dying. You fall back asleep before you can make sense of it. Outside, the wind hums through the thatch roof, a dog barks in the distance, and somewhere nearby, Alfreda is probably preparing another round of mouse paste just in case. You're just starting to think you might live after all when someone makes the executive decision to send you to a hospital. Now, before your brain conjures up images of sterile corridors and helpful nurses with clipboards, let's adjust that expectation by roughly 800 years. A hospital in the year 1200 isn't about clinical treatment or scientific care. It's more like being admitted into a holy waiting room, run by monks who specialize more in scripture than sutures. They carry you there on a cart lined with straw. The road is bumpy. Your spine is rethinking its life choices, and a goat follows the cart the whole way, bleating loudly. You're not sure if it's trying to comfort you or curse you. The hospital building itself looks like a barn married a chapel, and then gave up halfway through decorating. Stone walls, wooden beams, small stained glass windows filtering in pale light. It smells like lavender, sweat, and something you hope is soup. You're admitted by Brother Edric, a gentle monk with eyebrows like broom bristles and a habit of humming psalms under his breath. He nods at your name, asks no questions, and gently pats your shoulder. That's the intake procedure. No forms, no ID, just hope. You're laid in a long, narrow room with about 20 other sick people. No curtains, no privacy, just rows of pallets, each one a sagging bed of straw or maybe moss, depending on supply. You lie next to a man who's been coughing for so long he's achieved a kind of rhythm. Across from you, someone mutters about visions. It's a full house. The monks are kind, if not exactly medically trained. They clean wounds, they murmur prayers, they bring broth and water. Sometimes they chant. The chanting is oddly soothing, unless it's in Latin, which makes everything sound like a funeral mass, even when it's supposed to be upbeat. The main treatment here: care through devotion. This means you're encouraged to confess, pray, and maybe receive last rites just in case, but also to lie still, sip warm things, and avoid sin, especially the kind involving envy, lust, or refusing broth. A bell rings every few hours for the monks to pray. This wakes up half the patients and causes one man to yell that the angels are coming for him. The monks gently hush him with lavender water and a gentle back rub. It's not very medical, but it is very calming. If your fever flares again, Brother Edric arrives with a small dish of vinegar and rose petals. He dabs your temples and whispers a prayer. You're not sure if it's working, but he has kind hands and smells like sage. You decide to trust him for nourishment. You're given pottage, an eternal stew of barley, cabbage, and beans that's been bubbling for days. It's gray, it's lumpy, but you're hungry enough not to care. Occasionally, someone drops in a bit of fish or root vegetable, and it's treated like a national holiday. One scholarly debate that continues among historians is whether these early hospitals actually helped patients survive or simply offered a cleaner, quieter place to die. Certainly, the odds weren't great, but there's something to be said for the peace of it. No one is jabbing you with knives here. Just soft voices, candlelight, and the occasional clatter of someone dropping a crucifix. Monastic hospitals also believed in healing through order. Clean sheets well, cleanish swept floors routine. That might sound basic, but in 1200, cleanliness is already halfway to a miracle. A nun even brings you a clean cloth to wipe your face. You thank her like she just gifted you a kingdom. There are rules, of course: no shouting, no groaning louder than necessary, and absolutely no unchristian behavior, which apparently includes dice games, telling rude jokes, and referring to St. Lawrence as Toasty Larry. You slip up once. Brother Edric raises an eyebrow. You repent. If you're feeling strong enough, you're allowed to walk the courtyard garden. It's small, bordered by stone, and filled with medicinal herbs: comfrey, sage, marigold. The air smells green. You sit on a bench and try to imagine what your lungs look like inside. Probably a bit like the leeches left them, honestly. Some patients do worse. One man is moved behind a curtain and never returns. Another begins muttering in rhyme, and a monk sits with him all night, holding his hand and softly chanting psalms. You begin to realize that healing here isn't just about the body, it's about being witnessed. No one dies alone. That matters. In the evenings, A novice monk reads aloud from scripture or hagiographies the lives of saints. You listen, half dreaming, to the tale of Saint Roch, who caught the plague, wandered into the forest, and was healed by a dog. The moral is fuzzy, but the idea of a healing dog sounds wonderful. You miss dogs. One fringe practice that some monasteries adopted, placing relics, bones, cloth, teeth near or on the sick. Brother Edric hesitates, then brings you a relic wrapped in silk. He says it might be a piece of St. Walburga's shawl, or possibly just someone's old mitten. Either way, it's warm. At night, the ward is quiet except for breathing, the occasional moan, and the rhythmic drip of water into a basin. You lie there, tucked under layers of wool and prayer, and try to imagine what life will feel like after this. If there is an after this, healing in a medieval hospital isn't fast. It's like waiting for the moon to change phases, but your cough is less raw now. Your dreams less fevered, and when you sit up without dizziness, Brother Edric smiles and calls it a miracle. You smile back. Whether it's holy intervention, good broth, or sheer stubbornness, you're not dead. Not yet. You're just starting to settle into the rhythm of hospital life. Chants, broth, naps. Repeat when the whispers begin. Someone down the hall is vomiting blood, instantly. The energy in the ward changes. The monks, usually calm and soft-footed, begin moving with brisker purpose. Patients cross themselves. One woman insists on being moved to the far end of the room, muttering something about God's punishment under her breath. You meanwhile sit bolt upright, suddenly aware of every cough you've ever coughed. The rumors spread faster than the illness itself. He had a swelling in the neck. No, it was the groin. I heard he turned black as pitch before sunset. It's all hearsay. But in 1200, hearsay might as well be gospel, and gospel says this could be plague. Except, it isn't. Not that plague. The big one. The plague won't arrive for another 150 years. But that doesn't stop people from fearing it like it's already arrived. The word pestilence is thrown around liberally. Nobody's quite sure what it means. But it sounds bad. Worse than a fever. Worse than bloodletting. Worse than goose fat compresses. The sick man is quietly removed during the night. His bed is doused with vinegar. His blanket is burned. The next morning, a monk tells you that God has taken him swiftly, which is medieval for please stop asking questions. And now, because you were recently feverish yourself, suspicion falls on you too. The monks who were gently applying rose-scented bandages yesterday now hand you your clothes with silent urgency. You're being discharged. Technically, they say you're well enough to leave, but the expression on Brother Edric's face suggests it's more of a gentle exile. He presses a small cross into your hand. Go with God, he murmurs. You try not to take it personally. Outside, the world looks the same: mud, thatch, chickens, but the air carries a new edge. People watch you from doorways, not openly hostile, just cautious, like you might start bleeding from the eyes at any moment. Back in your village, your family is relieved to see you upright, but no one hugs you. Your mother weeps softly, joy, probably, but there's a tremble behind it. Your younger brother insists on sleeping on the roof. Just until you're really better, he says. You're not entirely unwelcome, just slightly radioactive. As days pass, you notice small things. People stepping a little farther away in conversation. Children crossing themselves as you walk by. Someone quietly wiping the cup you drank from when you weren't looking. You've become a simpler reminder of how fragile everyone really is. And food, forget it. You get broth at a distance. A neighbor leaves some bread at your door, then retreats like she's just performed a sacred offering. No one wants to risk contagion. 1. Fringe belief gaining traction in some areas. Illness spreads through sight. That's right, just looking at a sick person might doom you. You're told not to make eye contact with the priest's dog. You comply. There's also the idea that disease is carried by smells, so the house now reeks of burning rosemary, vinegar-soaked rags, and onions stuffed into your tunic pockets. You're basically a walking salad bar with trust issues. Historians still argue whether this early fear response was helpful or harmful. On one hand, isolating the sick was kind of smart. On the other hand, so was not assuming every sneeze was a divine punishment. Your aunt starts carrying a pomander ball, a small orb filled with spices and herbs. Every time she visits, it's supposed to purify the air. She holds it under her nose while talking to you, and sounds like she's constantly mid-sneeze. Still, she's the only one who shows up. So, you forgive the theatrics. Some people resort to flagellation, whipping themselves in public to atone for the sin they're sure caused the illness. Others just drink more beer. You lean toward the latter, not because it helps, but because it dulls the awkwardness of being the one who might still be contagious. You try to return to normal life, but the village has a long memory. You go to the well, and someone politely waits until you leave to fill their bucket. You walk to church, and there's always a little extra room in your pew. Social distancing. Medieval edition. At one point, a rumor circulates that you glowed faintly under the full moon. You kind of wish that were true. It'd be a better story. Then I coughed a lot and then got kicked out of monk camp. The town midwife offers you a charm to restore your welcome. It's made of rosemary, a pebble, and what she calls a hair from a blessed sheep. You don't ask questions. You hang it around your neck and practice smiling less threateningly. Eventually, the village gets distracted by a traveling troupe of acrobats and a cow that learned to open gates. Your illness becomes old news. A few brave souls even start visiting again. They still bring their own cups, but they stay longer. By now, you're no longer the specter of death. You're just that person who got really, really sick and lived. To tell the tale though, you mostly just nod mysteriously when asked. Better to let them wonder. Your appetite returns. So does your cough, though this one's different. Weaker? Less like a death rattle. More like a cat trying to clear its throat. You sit outside one morning, warm sunlight on your face, and think, maybe this is what healing looks like in 1200. Not sudden, not miraculous, just one cautious breath after another. And even now, you keep a sprig of rosemary in your pocket, just in case. By the time your cough becomes merely decorative and your breath stops whistling, like a broken bellows, your family decides you need a final cure, a pilgrimage. Because nothing says recovery like walking 100 miles in borrowed shoes to visit a saint's toenail. You're not entirely convinced, but in the year 1200, faith isn't optional, it's infrastructure. Besides, everyone agrees your lingering weakness is probably due to spiritual imbalance, not, say, surviving invasive leech therapy and a diet of boiled moss. So they pack your satchel with rye bread, dried beans, and something that might be cheese. And off you go. Your destination, a local shrine said to house a relic of Saint Thulburin, obscure but stubbornly popular saint whose left toe is rumored to cure everything from madness to gout. You don't have either of those, but you figure you'll hedge your bets. The road is long and muddy, flanked by fields and the occasional very judgmental cow. Your fellow pilgrims are a motley crew, a merchant's wife who won't stop sneezing, a knight who's clearly faking a limp to skip some feudal duty, and a boy who claims to be doing this for extra blessings after stealing a pie. You feel oddly at home. Pilgrimages aren't just about piety. They're a kind of medieval vacation. If your idea of leisure includes blistered feet, bandits, and sleeping in haylofts next to men who snore like thunder, along the way, you stay in taverns where the ale is warm and the bread is old enough to vote. Occasionally, a monk offers you shelter in exchange for a prayer and light sweeping. In one village, you encounter a woman selling pilgrim badges, cheap, pewter tokens shaped like saints, swords, and one that suspiciously resembles a duck. You buy one shaped like a scallop shell and pin it to your cloak. It doesn't do anything, but now you look the part. Each night, the group gathers to swap stories. Some tales are miraculous. My cousin's boils vanished after kissing St. Cuthbert's elbow. Others, more practical. If you eat only onions for 3 days, the fleas give up. One man offers to trade you his relic of St. Erasmus in exchange for half your bread. You decline. You've grown weirdly fond of that bread. Historians still argue whether these relics had psychological effects, spiritual ones, or if they simply served as placebos with medieval branding. But belief is half the medicine here. If people think a toenail can save them, they'll crawl to it on bleeding knees. You finally arrive at the shrine after several days of sore feet, damp cloaks, and at least one encounter with a goat that tried to eat your satchel. The shrine is small, nestled in a chapel that smells like incense and centuries. Pilgrims kneel in reverence, touch the stone, and whisper their petitions. When your turn comes, you approach the reliquarian, ornate silver box containing the fabled toe. A monk explains the toe's journey across Europe, its miraculous warmth, and the time it allegedly stopped a flood. You nod solemnly, even as your left eyebrow twitches. You place your hands on the box. You close your eyes. You breathe. You whisper a quiet, awkward prayer, not just for healing, but for understanding, for strength, for fewer mice in your pantry, and a return to semi-normal bowel movements. It's quiet, peaceful. No flashes of light, no sudden cures, but you feel something loosen in your chest. Maybe it's the final knot of fear, or maybe it's the lingering effects of that thyme compress from 2 weeks ago. Either way, you stand up feeling lighter. As you leave, you notice a donation box shaped like a grumpy angel. You drop in a pebble and a button. It's all you have left, and the angel doesn't complain. On the way home, Your body feels sturdier. Your appetite stronger. The sun feels warmer on your skin. Or maybe your fever's making a comeback, hard to say. You pass the same cows. They look less judgmental now. One evening, your group shelters in a roadside inn where the hostess claims to be descended from St. Bridget's second cousin. She offers you stew that tastes like hope and too much pepper. You eat 3 bowls and briefly forget what being sick even felt like. Back in your village, people greet you differently. Pilgrims are treated with a kind of hushed respect, like they've seen strange things and live to gossip about them. Someone asks if you touch the toe. You nod. Everyone gasps. You don't correct them. You hang your scallop badge over the hearth, not for healing, exactly, but as a reminder that you walked all that way, that you didn't collapse, that you kept going even when your feet screamed louder than the roadside crows. You still wheeze a bit in the mornings. Your knees click when you kneel to pray, but you're upright. And in 1200, that's the equivalent of glowing with health. One final quirky remedy you pick up along the road: boiled turnip and sheep milk, taken at dawn for 3 days to clear the spirits. You try it. It clears something, possibly your desire to ever see a turnip again. Still, you're better now. Or at least you've convinced everyone else you are. And honestly, you're halfway convinced yourself. You wake up to birdsong, and for the first time in weeks, it doesn't sound like a bad omen. Your limbs ache a little, sure, but it's the good kind, like your body is finally returning to itself. After a long, messy vacation. No more fevers. No more leeches. No more whispered prayers over bubbling pots of beetroot and mystery. You've emerged from the fog of medieval sickness, a little thinner, a little grayer, and much smellier but alive. Now comes the aftermath. Your hair is patchy in places from all the sweating and scabbing. Your breath still carries a hint of boiled cabbage, and your joints creak like the chapel door on a rainy morning. But villagers smile again when they see you. One of them even offers you half an apple. Sure, she throws it gently from 6 feet away, but it's progress. People say you're recovered. It's a nice word, cozy, final sounding, but in truth, recovery in 1200 isn't a clean finish line. It's more like wandering out of a swamp and still finding leeches in your shoes 3 days later. Physically, you're mostly back to normal. You eat full meals again, bread that doesn't disintegrate when touched, cheese that squeaks when bitten, even the occasional roast root. Your appetite has returned with a vengeance. You eye your neighbor's turnips with ill-disguised intent. But emotionally, that's another story. There's something hollow inside, like you lost a piece of yourself in the sweating and the moaning, and the desperate prayers muttered at the moon. Some mornings, you stare at your fingers, flex them just to be sure they still belong to you. Your family notices, they speak soft around you, bring you food without asking, and occasionally pat your back like you're a horse recovering from a long journey. You don't mind. You feel like a horse recovering from a long journey. And then comes the guilt. The boy down the lane. He didn't make it. His family burned all his belongings in a pit behind the barn. They say he had the black blood, but no one really knows. One day he was coughing, and the next, the church bell tolled 10 times in the fog. You were sicker than he was, but you survived. And in a time when medicine often feels like guesswork and relics, nobody really knows why. Some call it God's will, others call it luck. You're not sure which one feels heavier. Historians still debate whether recovery meant anything long-term in the medieval mindset. Some say it brought spiritual clarity. Others believe it simply added another notch to your mental tally of close calls with the infinite. In your case, you come out of it changed. You find yourself staring longer at small things. The way sunlight filters through straw. The sound of a pot bubbling on a fire. The crunch of crusty bread between your teeth. You don't enjoy life more. Exactly, you just notice it more. Every breath feels slightly earned. You also develop a new superstition, entirely of your own invention. If you touch wood 3 times before eating, the food won't make you sick. You do it quietly. Nobody questions you. After everything you've been through, a little harmless knocking isn't the strangest thing you've done. There's a brief attempt to return to your usual work, tending goats, patching fences, muttering curses at the neighbor's geese, but it's slow. Your muscles forgot how to lift anything heavier than a mug of broth. You build yourself back up with stubbornness, one stick of firewood at a time. Your cousin jokes that your recovery has made you more interesting. You've got stories now, he says, nudging you with a crust of bread. Real ones. Monks and leeches and miracle toes. You swat him with a ladle and smile. He's not wrong. One day, someone suggests you write it all down. You laugh. Nobody writes unless they're rich or holy. But that night, you scratch a small symbol into the wall above your bed, a scallop shell. the shape of your pilgrim badge. A tiny reminder that you walked through death's front yard and came out with mud on your boots and breath in your lungs. You hear talk in the village of a new healer setting up shop the town's over. She uses boiled river stones and chants in a language no one understands. A few people are skeptical. You're not. You've seen too much to scoff at strange cures. After all, you once let someone rub beetle paste on your chest while singing to St. Michael. You visit her weeks later, just to see. She presses your palm, listens to your breath, and tells you something unusual. You were supposed to live. That's it. No potions. No prayers, just that. It stays with you. Now. As you lie in bed one evening cleanish, warmish, full, you reflect on what healing really meant. It wasn't just the fever breaking or the pain easing. It was the moment. You heard yourself laugh again. The first time bread tasted like bread. The first morning you woke up and didn't feel watched by something unseen. You're not perfect. You still cough when it rains. Your memory skips like a stone across certain fever days. But you're here. And here, in 1200, is everything. And yes, you still carry that wax figure of Saint Apollonia in your pouch. She's a bit melty now. But you figure she earned the ride. And now, as we leave that time behind, you let the images soften. The straw mattress fades. The scent of thyme and vinegar grows faint in the background. You've walked the full road of recovery. The sweat, the fear, the awkward leeches. And you made it home again. Picture yourself resting beside a quiet hearth. The fire low. The air still. Your breath comes steady. Your limbs at peace. Somewhere outside, a night owl stirs, but you're warm, wrapped in linen. Safe from cold drafts and bad humors. The relics, the charms, the whispers, they blur now. Like fog at sunrise. What stays is the sense of survival. That soft thread of life, pulled taut, and then loosened again into a breath. Then another. Then one more. There's no more need to watch the door. No one is coming with herbs or bowls or saints. It's quiet now. You're whole. And as the last candle flickers in the chapel of your mind, you nestle deeper into your blanket. The journey is over. And you, dear traveler, have earned your rest. Sleep well, and let the wind carry you gently into dream.